Hi everyone, welcome to this conversation that we're going to have today with Nick Wagner and Diana Macalintal from TeamRCIA. Welcome to Australia. You're at the end of your journey.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
It's great to have you here. Are you feeling a little weary now that you're at the end, or are you still feeling cowed?
A little weary, but also sad that we have to leave this just beautiful community, this beautiful country. This is our second time here in Australia, and it just feels more and more like home for us.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the first time I heard you or met you was in Perth a couple of years ago. It might be nearly 3 years ago now,
yeah.
3 years ago. And so I wanted to start this conversation with just hearing a little bit about yourselves. I guess there's two things that I've really noticed that I love. One is your passion for RCIA. So I'd be really keen to know how you got to this space with TeamRCIA. And the second thing that I've noticed, and I follow you a little bit on Facebook, and I see your little videos that you do and everything, there's a real passion between the two of you. You really feed off each other very well. So I'd sort of love to know a little bit about how you met and how that, you know, you don't always find two people whose passions seem to align, or maybe they didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. But so maybe if we start with that bit first about how you met and how you discovered that you had sort of passions with this work, with this ministry.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we met because I hired Diana for a conference, a workshop that I was planning in a previous job that I had. And I had, in my mind, I had another musician in mind, and I just had forgotten to tell him that I had him in mind. And by the time I did ask him to participate, he was booked and I couldn't get him. And he recommended Diana, and I didn't know her, didn't know anything about her, but I trusted him. So, so I wound up hiring her. But this was all in the days before internet, before email, so it's all by phone conversations. And I'm sort of a control freak, and so so I was getting the sense on the phone that Diana wasn't quite as
serious.
Yeah. Well, I guess it was more like I just didn't know. You know, I wasn't getting. Mostly, I was still mad at myself that I hadn't gotten my friend, the guy I was counting on to do this, and then so the conference comes. Diana, I should say too, we were in different cities, so I had no way to meet with her personally about this before the conference. So she flew out to San Jose, where the conference was, where I lived, and we got to the conference, and the first thing is about to start, and I asked her to sing something just to get people together, get them paying attention, get them ready to start, and the first note out of her mouth, I knew everything was going to be fine. It was just like, as you experienced her presence and her talent and her ability to just communicate were so clear right from the very beginning. And so that's how we met.
Well, that's how we met. But over the years, we were both liturgists, and so that is a great connection that we have. And then maybe just to clarify for people who don't know, we are married now.
Yes.
So there is that connection, but it really has been such a joy and a blessing to be able to do this kind of focused work with the Catechumenate and with RCIA coordinators, with your life partner, with a person that...
So how do you find working together? Like, you know, you're with each other on the weekends and in the evening, and then you go to work together. How does that?
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't work for me.
Yeah.
It's constant. It's a constant lifestyle of working, which also has its challenges, because then we're constantly working and we're constantly talking about work.
Do you draw a line and say, okay, now it's home time?
We do we're pretty good about it. Sometimes we fall backwards a little bit, but on a usual day we end at 5 or 6 o'clock, and then we have happy hour, and there's a rule: no work at happy hour. And that pretty much shuts us down. We don't tend to bring up work later during dinner, or once in a while if we have a big project coming up, that'll happen. But for the most part, when the work day is done, we're done with work.
But a great joy too is that part of our work is all of this traveling.
Yes.
To
We like
meet
to travel.
with other dioceses and team members and things like that. And so to be able to travel together for work and also for our own holiday and for our own recreation is a wonderful blessing for us.
So tell me about TeamRCIA. I mean, did it just sort of start sort of grassroots, and then were you doing this as ministry in your own parishes, or how did that grow into something that was formal?
Our paths are both a little different there. I really got involved in parish work with RCIA when I moved to California about 30 years ago. Before that, I'd been involved with it a little bit in diocesan work in the Midwest of the United States. And I also had a master's degree in liturgy, in which part of that was studying RCIA. So I had this kind of mixed background about it. But one thing that was common for both of us is we participated in a group in the United States called the North American Forum on the Catechumenate. And they, United States and Canada. And they were around for about 40 years, and they did a whole lot of wonderful work to get the catechumenate process established in parishes in North America. And the way they would do that is they would sponsor these wonderful live training events. And they had a large network of workshop leaders, and the executive director of the organization would put together these teams. I don't know how he did it, but he'd just sort of pull names together and put people together. And then he'd fly us all to some place, and we'd do this event. And Diane and I both were part of that organization, although we never were on a team together because we're both liturgists. So he put a liturgist, a catechist, a priest, a youth person, so it'd be all these different. So two liturgists would never wind up on the team. So we were both part of the organization, but never worked together in that organization.
So as part of that organization, the North American Forum on the Catechumenate, their primary activity was to go out and with these teams to various places in North America to provide 3, 4, even 5-day workshops, institutes for a region. And those were just amazing events that really established, I believe, a good foundation in the United States and Canada for the RCIA process, this new ritual text that none of the parishes knew how to approach or work or implement. And so thanks to the forum, that really took off in the US and Canada. But one thing that we saw, both as team members for that, was after these training institutes, people would go back to their parishes, and there would be they would have so many questions and still need more clarification. And this was all somewhat before the internet, or the internet was starting to become more popular and more accessible for people. We saw a way to help people after these institutes get more answers, get more clarification. And so that was the impetus for starting this online resource, the TeamRCIA.com. And do you want to tell the story about how we were sitting at happy hour?
Yeah, so it's one of our happy hours. We're pretty serious about happy hours, so we were having a happy hour one night, and we were just talking. I think one of us had just come back from a Forum Institute. We were talking about how can we help people who just come home now and want more information. And Diana had some success with creating a blog, an online web page, which she would help people in our diocese with liturgical questions. And she said, well, let's try creating a blog for RCIA.
So you started small.
Yeah, so it was really just a web page, and we'd post some question we'd heard about on one of our institutes, or a question we knew people had, and we'd try to answer that, and we'd do that once a week or once every other week, and we'd put it up there. And really, that's how it started, was just a little bitty, and that's all we thought it'd ever be. It wasn't really a big grand plan. And then we added on to that some little courses that people could take, and then we added a bookstore where people could buy books that we thought were good for people to have. And then after we'd been doing that a few years and it was kind of growing really well, and I was moving more and more into that full time. And about that time, this would be about, what, 4 or 5 years ago now, the North American Forum went out of business. They had some financial trouble. They couldn't sustain their model anymore. And then we started getting phone calls to fulfill dates that the forum had set up with dioceses and couldn't meet because they weren't there. And my first response was, no, we're an online ministry. We're not going to do that. And the Holy Spirit kind of laughed at us, and we kept getting calls. And so we prayed about it and really tried to imagine. We didn't want to recreate the forum. That was kind of their thing. But we tried to imagine, what could we do with our gifts? And we're not a national organization. It's just kind of the two of us. How can we meet some of these needs? And so out of that, we developed some live training institutes that we added on to our online presence. We expanded our online presence. And then about that time, about 3 years ago, we got an email from folks in Australia asking us to come speak at your national conference on the Catechumenate. And we didn't even really know we had that many followers in Australia. We knew we had some, but apparently if you put stuff up in English on websites, people from all over the world can read it. So that was a wonderful blessing and gift for us to discover that and come here and meet so many people so committed to catechumenate.
Yeah. So that these live institutes traveling around the world now is a major part of what we do as TeamRCIA, but the foundation, the majority of the work we do is online and accessible to anyone around the world. So it's the articles that Nick often writes and other people throughout our network might write every week. And there are free podcasts that we used to do during these happy hours, and so you'll hear ice clinking in the background a little bit during these audio recordings where we talk about RCIA topics. And then we had done a monthly webinar for several years, something like 7 years. And so all of those are on the website, and now we do 4 times a year a free webinar. And these are amazing gatherings of people all throughout the globe. And we have at each of these gatherings maybe 500 people sign up for each webinar. And so we'll have this conversation with people in Australia, New Zealand, in the United States, Canada. We've had people in Trinidad, Tobago, in the UK, in Abu Dhabi, last time in, everywhere. And it's this wonderful community online, even though it's Nick and myself talking throughout the hour and a half. People are engaging with their questions and introducing themselves, and even some Australians will come at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning with their cup of tea or
just tweak that a little bit, like 6 a.m. would be much better.
It would be. But we tell people too, sign up anyways for the webinar. It's free, but you also get the recording as well. So you can wake up later. That's right. At a reasonable time. And watch the recording. But that's.
So who else is? It's not just you and Nick in TeamRCIA.
Pretty much. Yeah, we have a couple of assistants that help us and a couple of volunteers that write things for us. But the full-time workers are.
So what's your relationship then with? Is it with a parish or a diocese, or do you sort of see yourself pretty much on your own, or have you got the backing of a diocese, or how does?
No, we're on our own. So but we have worked in many dioceses, so we're sort of kosher in a sense.
Yes. No, so we're not an official arm of any
Bishop's
church institute. No, we are our own entity. But we do work very hard to make sure that what we are putting out, whether online or in person, is based on and founded on what the church documents are saying about the catechumenate and the process of initiation. And so sometimes people will come back to us and say, oh, we love TeamRCIA's approach to RCIA and initiation and everything. And that makes us feel good, but it also reminds us we have to make sure people don't see this as our approach. Yes. This is what we're trying to communicate, is the church's model and principles for initiation.
It seems like a new approach or a different approach or our approach because so many people really haven't studied and dived into the teaching of the church on the catechumenate and read the text of the rite of Christian initiation of adults. And so the kind of process or program that they're offering in their parishes is more often comes from Catholic publishers or a teacher in the parish who developed their process and that got handed down, or a priest that learned it somewhere and got transferred to that parish, or there are companies that are producing videos that really are sort of high school level theology courses that they're marketing as RCIA programs, and all of those things are what people get or have access to or feel comfortable with. And so when they hear the church's vision, they've never really gotten that as the church's vision. And when they hear that from us, they think of it as, oh, it's one more in these line of approaches. And it's what we try to help people understand. This is the norm of the church. This is what the bishops have asked us to do. And anytime we deviate from that, there may be good pastoral reasons for doing that, but we have to always try to get closer and closer to what the vision of the church is.
So we can come forward now into Australia, because as I said, I saw you a couple of years ago, and you obviously must have loved the place and accepted the invitation to come out this year. So tell me a bit about your trip, just a little pot of where you've been and what you've enjoyed, and maybe any of the, I guess, the challenges that you've noticed that you've picked up along the way. So
driving on the left.
I think that's amazing that you even, I would have picked up a chauffeur or Uber or something, so well done.
Driving on the left.
So you arrived in Brisbane, is that right?
Yes, so we flew from the US to Brisbane and spent about a week there just acclimating ourselves to the time change and everything.
And the beaches.
And the beaches. we were blessed to be able to spend a couple of days in Mooloolaba. And we put a little video of our time there on Facebook, so anyone can find that there. But that was lovely, just to not do anything for a couple days and be on the beach. And that was during the school holidays, so there were lots of children running out into the ocean.
The freezing cold ocean.
Surfing and body surfing, and so that was lovely. So that prepared us for the main reason why we were invited to be here, why I was invited to be here and Nick tagged along, was the National Conference for the Australian Pastoral Musicians Network were having their conference in Melbourne, and so I was one of the keynote speakers there. So we love Melbourne, and were able to spend almost a week there. And then, since we were going to be here for 5 weeks total, we had tagged on more gatherings with specific dioceses who wanted us to come. So then we went to Parramatta. We
did a day-long training in Parramatta. And back to Brisbane, we did...
Wait, but Parramatta...
Oh, the reason... Yeah, as soon as Diana heard we figured out we were coming back to Australia, her number one reason for wanting to come, other than doing the keynote, was to go to Parramatta.
For the gelato.
It's the first time we were here. We had an event in Parramatta, same diocese, and we discovered this gelato show.
The gelato? Was it good?
It was amazing.
Better than the first time.
Goodness me, all the way to Australia for gelato.
Yes. Well, there was a long queue this time. The last time we were here, it was just everyone for themselves coming to the counter for the gelato.
So they put some of those theater ropes up and...
Yes.
That's serious gelato.
It is. It was very
so
serious.
You did the gelato.
We did the gelato.
You did some training.
We watched the grand finals on our way back that weekend. And then, where did we go?
We had a couple workshops in Brisbane, and after that we had an event in Maitland, Newcastle.
So that was just last weekend?
Yes. So between Brisbane and Maitland, Newcastle, we drove from...
You drove.
I drove from Brisbane to Byron Bay and had a couple of just days for holiday there. And then to Coffs Harbour, spent a day there, had some wonderful dinners there, and then down to, where are we now?
We're in Varroville.
Varroville, in Varroville, yes. So that is our stay, our journey.
That's great.
Yeah.
So when you've been here, you've probably heard that we're having a plenary.
Yes.
The plenary 2020 council. What have you picked up from that? What have you, the vibes or the energy or the lack of energy or what have you got any thoughts on that? Because I mean, for us, it's really big.
Yes.
For us, for those of us that have been involved in it, there's a lot of energy and a lot of passion, and so I'd be interested to hear what you...
Yes.
Well, I think you said energy or lack of energy, and I think I've picked up both from here because from what I understand, there are listening sessions that are happening right now in parishes to help prepare for the plenary, and those are either well attended or not well attended, depending on the parish and depending on the energy of the leadership there to organize that. And then from what we understand about the plenary, that we don't really have a similar thing or haven't had a similar thing in the U.S. But what we understand, this is a nationwide conversation in which the bishops and the Catholic leadership are attempting to listen to the voice of the people of God.
Well, not just in the United States, but worldwide, one process that has been similar that has found some good energy in the U.S. is the Encuentro process.
Yes, that's a good point.
So the worldwide Encuentro process, which begins at the grassroots level with the parishes and listening to the different communities in the parish, and then that moves to the diocesan level, and that moves to the national level, and then finally a worldwide convocation where all of those ideas and responses are brought forward. And so that to me sounds like what the plenary is attempting to do, to
I've
hear.
not heard of that process.
Oh, yeah. So the Encuentro process is primarily...
Is it about a particular topic, or
I think
is
they
it
have
very
themes
broad?
each time.
Themes?
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much about a topic, it's about an audience.
Yeah.
So the audience is focused primarily on youth and young adults in the Hispanic communities. But especially in the United States, because the Hispanic community is so integrated and really a major significant part of the national population, it really affects all of our parishes and all of our communities together. And so it's become a listening method for our parishes to bring those ideas to the national conference. It's still being embraced in different regions, some regions more successfully than others.
Well, in those regions that are more heavily Latino are implementing it more successfully than.
And I know in specific dioceses they'll do a diocesan synod where it's that listening kind of process. But we've been really interested in hearing how the national process is, or the national, the pastoral, what is it called, the national process?
The plenary?
The plenary, that's the word. I was trying to think, what was that P word?
Yeah.
The plenary. How it's really not just focused on one topic, but it's
So it's been cut down to 6 themes.
Six
themes,
themes.
yes.
And so that idea of this is about the entire life of the church in Australia, not just one
So
focus.
we're really excited to find out what happens.
Yes.
Yes.
You are too.
Yeah, well, so am I. But I want to have trust that it will, that it will, bring good fruit. That's that's my hope. So stay tuned. Yeah, I mean it's a process. It just doesn't have an end date. It does go on. So now that you have spent a couple of times here in Australia, tell me what you see as maybe the similarities or the differences in the challenges of the RCIA? What are the things that you hear stories when you hear and you say, it's just like it is at home?
Yeah.
Are there similarities? I mean, as in the concerns that we have and in the positives?
I'd say the biggest one that's common to both our communities is the secularization that's happening. So you can't count on people coming from a Christian culture, or that the culture outside the parish is somehow going to help support the mission of the gospel. And that, you know, we're mostly visitors here. We haven't been here long enough to feel like we're Australian yet. Getting closer and closer. Diana eats Vegemite. I've tried Vegemite. But it's our sense that the secularization is sort of further advanced in Australia than it is in the U.S. and Canada. But even so, it's not like when I was growing up, where you just assumed. I grew up in a very Catholic city, St. Louis, Missouri, and you just assumed that everyone was sort of on the same page, even, you know. And that we can't assume that anymore. So there has to be the challenge, I think, that's common to both the North America and Australia is we who are faithful Catholics in love with Jesus and wanting to spread the mission of the gospel have to be much more public and much more out loud about our faith out in the world, because it's no longer normal. It's countercultural to have these values that we have, and they really are. As Jesus taught us, that it's what brings about the kingdom of God when we live this way. When we live a mission of mercy, that as Pope Francis tells us, when we can do that, the world takes notice. It becomes something that causes comment, and. I'm an introvert. I've come from German American heritage, and we don't like to talk out loud about our faith too much. And there are lots and lots of folks in all different cultures that are like that, and we have to get over that a little bit. We have to be more forward thinking. More.
It's a challenge.
It is a challenge. It is a challenge. But if you think about it, if you were on the highway and there was an accident and you were the first person to see the accident and somebody's hurt on the side of the road, you would stop and help them. And Pope Francis kind of says that's the situation the world is in right now. There's people on the side of the road who are dying, and we have to stop and help them. We have to do something that changes the way, that changes the forces of where secularization is taking us.
Yeah. I think another common experience between Australia and the United States is this understanding, kind of a misperception that RCIA is primarily catechetical, a catechetical process. And therefore, when we say things like, you know, you have to stop and help a person who is hurt alongside the road, it would be akin to stopping and saying, as Pope Francis did say, how is your blood level and your cholesterol? Are you exercising and dieting? Instead of actually stopping and helping them with their specific need at that very moment. When we use RCIA as primarily a catechetical process rather than a ritual encounter, a liturgical encounter with the living Christ, who is beyond what we can explain, who is mystery, then we have asked the question, how is your cholesterol? Versus how can I show the mystery of God's love to this person in this moment, in this time, and embrace them with that. And when they feel embraced and accepted and loved, then I can lead them on this path that I myself have encountered and discovered in the Christian community. So that's the process, but too often we jump to, let's teach them the doctrine, let's teach
20
them.
lessons we have.
Yes.
And then we wonder, well, why don't they stay? Why aren't they passionate? Why aren't they disciples?
Yes.
Why does it feel like they're just jumping through the hoops to get the sacrament or whatever it is they're looking for? And I think it's because we've misplaced the goal of initiation. The goal is not to become Catholic. The goal is to become disciples who follow the way of Christ, yes, and who go out to make other disciples, yes, to preach by our life, yes, first, and then to say that message, that core message. God loves you. God is walking by your side. Jesus is present here in this Christian community, and we want to share that.
That's a much harder approach,
It
though,
is.
isn't it, than giving them 20 lessons. I mean, 20
Yeah.
lessons is much more convenient.
Yes.
Yes.
What you're proposing,
Yeah,
and what the right proposes is way harder.
Oh,
Yes.
I know.
Way
Yes.
harder.
But it's the only way that renews the entire parish community.
Yes.
It's that place of vulnerability and intimacy,
Yes.
In relationship with other people through Christ makes us better disciples, rather than just more informed, intellectualized,
Yes,
Christians. So.
Yes.
You know, we hear that too in the United States. It's harder, and it's harder in one sense and easier in another sense. So it's harder in the sense that we have to be more vulnerable. We have to let go of this old paradigm that we have. We have to let go of our need to sort of start everybody at the same time and end everybody at the same time. Yeah. We have to, in the letting go, I think, is the hard part. The actual work of telling others that Jesus loves them is like physically and intellectually less work than creating 20 lessons. Yeah. So when people say that they don't have time to be on the RCIA team because they can't show up for these 20 meetings or however many they are. Okay, so you don't have to show up for 20 meetings. You know, that's not what we're asking. We're asking you to tell new people why you believe what you believe, in whatever time you have to share. And so it's in that way, folks we've talked to who've kind of made that paradigm shift, who've taken on the church's vision of how we're supposed to do this process. They tell us it's actually easier. They're less stressed. They're less worried about saying the right thing all the time. And they feel like they have some visible success because they can see the spark of faith in others when they actually share their faith.
I do feel like sometimes when you have, say, a group of catechumens and the candidates, there sometimes does feel a pressure, though, on, you know, like, oh, I'm getting married, you know, and and will this be done by, you know, my wedding day is going to be, and they tell you February, and you suck yourself and you go, oh no, that's going to be before Easter, and you go, oh, sorry. So you get caught up into this this timing and the precision timing, or I want my kids to go to a Catholic school, and the sign up is in May, and you sort of the whole time working on this calendar that just doesn't suit the you know, you listen to the story and you think this is what they want, but this is not going to match what they possibly need.
Well, so there's a mismatch in what we're offering and what they want. So what they want is to get married, or they want to join the Catholic school. And if we said to them, you can do that without becoming Catholic, they wouldn't sign up to become Catholic. And we say to them, well, to do that, you have to be Catholic. And that's a little bit on us. We're setting up a barrier to sort of get them on our page. If you sign up for our page, we'll sign up for your page. It's a quid pro quo kind of thing. And instead we have to think about, when this person comes to us and says, you know, we're getting married in February, what do we have to do? Then right away we have to, I believe, what the church is asking us to do, what Jesus asks us to do, what Pope Francis asks us to do, is to sort of listen to that person's wound. What is it that you most need right now from the church? Well, I need, you know, if you really got behind I need a date for the church and I need a priest to marry. So if you got under that, like, what do you most need from the church right now? Well, I need some assurance that this marriage is going to work. I need some assurance I'm not making a mistake. I need a community that's going to support us after we get married and we don't have time to come to church, and we don't have. I need just some friends. You know, whatever. What's the wound? What's the thing on the side of the road? What is it this person actually needs? And then how do we respond to that without saying, here's all the hoops you have to go through before we'll marry you or before we'll let you into the school or whatever it is. But we're just so afraid to because if we try to get to those issues that are, if we peel back the onion and try to get at those issues that are really a lot deeper, that also means we have to be more revealing and vulnerable of ourselves.
And it takes time.
It takes time,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I've worked in places where someone said, well, that was a long conversation. You were on the phone for a long time.
Yeah.
Haven't you got other things to do?
Right.
And I'm thinking, I've just heard a person's life story about how they were married and then they divorced, but now they want to become Catholic. That takes a long time, that story. And they need to come back in for another cup of coffee to hear the rest.
Exactly.
So it takes time, doesn't it?
And that is the work. That is the work we're supposed to do. So much of the other stuff that we call work, the administrative stuff, the busyness stuff, the scheduling, the logistics, that is secondary to the primary work of listening to other people's stories and being present with them.
Jesus had the same problem. The disciples were always, come on, next town, we got to get on, we got to get this message out. And Jesus was like, let's just sit here for a while. I'm going to go pray. You guys, and like the woman at the well, Pope Francis tells this story a lot because it's so classic, They show up and they want to go convert Samaria. It's like they want to go around and preach the good news. And Jesus just stops at the well to talk to this one woman. And he's there for so long, the disciples get hungry, and so they go into town to get lunch. And they come back, and he's still talking to the woman.
Yeah.
And they're a little frustrated. The scripture says they start grumbling, it's because Jesus is not on schedule. And so then, it kind of wraps up his conversation. The woman goes into town, same town that the professional religious educators have just been to. And she comes back with the whole town to meet Jesus. They came back with lunch, and she came back with the town. And so it's this need we have to stay on schedule and meet the agenda and all that. It's not the gospel. It is what disciples do, because I'm not any better than those first disciples. I do the same thing they were doing. But Jesus gives us a different path. He's like Diana said, the first task is to just listen to what the wound is, listen to what the need is, and then try to be a healing presence to that, and that evangelizes.
Nick and Diana, thank you very much. It's great to know a little bit more about you and your mission and your passion. Thanks for sharing some time with us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.